I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Happy New Year, Kiki!
Happy New Year, Tuesday.
Here we are, 2025, and for our first film of the new year, we are going back to old school Disney, The Absent-Minded Professor from 1961. When it came to doing The Absent-Minded Professor, it was up to, it was a decision we had to make. Were we going to do the original movie? Or were we going to do a movie, the movie that our generation would probably be more familiar with? That is the 1997 remake of this movie, Flubber, with Robin Williams. And both of us decided, let's do the original. I grew up watching this movie on the Disney Channel. And Kiki, you did say as well that you grew up watching this original movie.
Yeah, I forget. I think maybe I grew up watching it on like AMC, TCM, something like that, when they had a deal with Disney.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it was like ABC would show it every now and again.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember watching this movie a lot during my childhood, even without the Disney Channel, so it was showing somewhere.
I remember this movie being in color. Because the version on Disney Plus is black and white, and I had to look it up. And apparently, in 1986, Disney did colorize this movie for the Disney Channel airing. So, yeah, the colorized version is not on Disney Plus.
Which I'm okay with because the black and white is the original. I'm all for the original. I do remember seeing the colorized version, but I remember the black and white version more often. So that was probably the version that they sent out to whatever channel I watched it on, and then the Disney Channel got the colorized version.
Also, on that, very rare black and white live action Disney film, because when Disney started doing live action with like the original Treasure Island, not the, animated, not the Muppet version, the original Treasure Island that Disney did, that was in color. So to have this, this 1960s movie be in black and white, that's rare for Disney. And I understand kind of why, and we kind of talked about this off mic. This is a post-Sleeping Beauty Disney. And in our Sleeping Beauty episode, we discussed that Sleeping Beauty was not a hit for Disney, and it almost bankrupted the studio. They had to start cutting a lot of corners. This is where we get the Xerox era of Disney animation, and, their bigger movies are going to be in color, but for their smaller budget movies, it was black and white because black and white films were cheaper. Black and white cameras were cheaper. But still, since Disney is known as an innovator of film, even back then, it's rare to see a live action black and white Disney film. I think it's this and Shaggy Dog, if we're not counting like the Zorro compilation movies. As far as I'm aware of, if there's another live-action Disney black and white movie, that was not an artistic choice. I have to stress that, because Frankenweenie's in black and white, but that was Tim Burton's artistic choice.
I know Son of Flubber was also black and white.
We'll get to Son of Flubber.
But I mean, if we're just talking about the movies that they did in this period that were black and white, I don't think Son of Flubber was artistic choice. I think they did it for the same reason that Shaggy Dog and Absent-Minded Professor were black and white. So yeah, there weren't very many black and white films that they did once color was kind of out there in the world, because Disney, as we've talked about before, was such an innovator in color. But like you said, after Sleeping Beauty did not do as well as they had hoped, which go back and listen to our Sleeping Beauty episode, because that is my favorite of the kind of OG Disney princess films. And I never understood why that was not a bigger hit, because growing up as a kid, that was always my favorite of the like old school Disney movies.
Because it was expensive as hell to make. They were never going to make their money back on that. Not until the re-release.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it, we talked about it in there. It wasn't as well received. For them to kind of be like, hey, we're Disney, we're the animation people that do everything in like gorgeous color, and now here's a couple of black and white films in the late 50s, early 60s. Like, that's what you get with B movies.
By this point, the show had been called, they had changed the name of the show to The Wonderful World of Color.
Yeah, and that was when most people did not have color TVs. Like, you had to be like rolling in dough to have a color TV. A color TV was a major get on a game show. Like, you know how on Price is Right or whatever, they'll go like, a new car! Like, back at this time, a color TV was kind of that same level. People were like, holy crap, a color TV?
Now you can get a high-def TV for less than $100 at Target or Walmart or something.
Yeah, but it's like, at that point, like, Disney is doing TV shows for like 2% of the population who own TVs even. And yet they're making black and white movies. Not many of them, as we said, but it is still, it's like if I had a nickel, I wouldn't have that many nickels, but it's weird that it happened this many times.
Yeah. And you mentioned Son of Flubber. This is the first live-action Disney movie to get a sequel. This movie did well enough in theaters that they would come back and do a sequel for the first time. Son of Flubber, which came out 2 years after this, would reunite the cast and, become the first live-action Disney sequel.
And sadly, not the last.
I mean, 2 just came out in the last 2 months.
Yeah. I'm not saying that all of the Disney sequels are bad, but dang it, there are more misses than hits in that category.
This would also be the first appearance of Medfield College, which would be the same location that another movie we talked about took place in. That would be the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes and the Dexter Riley trilogy. So the Dexter Riley movies and the Flubber movies, at least the original ones, take place in the same universe.
Yeah, and in fact, a lot of Disney movies use this Medfield College of Technology as their backdrop, and Medfield in general. It is named after a real, I mean, we didn't really get into this when we did Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, but we might as well now. It was named after a real town in Massachusetts. Supposedly some friends of Walt Disney lived there, and he visited there sometimes to visit his friends, and it just kind of stuck in his head as like a cool name for a town, and it got used. And there's not a Medfield College, so it just became a thing that could be used. It shows up in all of the Absent-Minded Professor films, the Dexter Riley films, the town itself, Medfield, is in Shaggy DA. Then, of course, it shows up again in Flubber. The Journey to Imagination attraction at Epcot had a lot of references to Medfield College as you're standing in line for the actual attraction.
When it was kind of next to Honey, I Shrunk the Audience, they pretty much referenced every scientific character in the Disney canon, from Fred McMurray's character in this movie all the way to Rick Moranis' character in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah.
So it's possible that all of those movies are now in the same canon thanks to the Journey into Imagination ride.
Yeah. One of the other cool things is that there's a sign in the Walt Disney World Railroad that has a sign that says train arriving from Medfield and next train departing for Rutledge, which, as we know from this movie, is Medfield's rival college.
Another part of this canon universe, we have Keenan Wynn, and we'll come back to him in a minute, and he plays the character of Alonzo Hawk. He would reprise that character not only in the sequel Son of Flubber, but also in Herbie Rides Again. So now the Herbie movies are in this universe. Disney making a universe without even intending to do it.
Yeah, I think it was more just them liking Keenan Wynn.
They had Ed Wynn was a staple of the Disney movies at that point, and he's in this movie.
One of 3 movies, I believe, where Keenan Wynn appears with his father, Ed Wynn. This is one of 3 appearances for the character of Alonzo Hawk. Like you said, he's in Son of Flubber, and then Herbie Rides Again, and then Keenan Wynn plays a version of this same character under a different name. Like, it's kind of Alonzo Hawk with the serial number scraped off, in Shaggy Dog and Shaggy DA.
Fred McMurray's in Shaggy Dog, so...
Yeah, it's one of those things where you want that kind of guy. It's like, well, we want a Keenan Wynn type. Why don't we just call Keenan Wynn,
Basically, yeah.
Also,
a bit of history in this movie. This is the first movie in the Disney Pantheon to feature a Sherman Brothers song. The Medfield Fight Song, written by the Sherman Brothers, the first Sherman Brothers song to be used in a Disney movie.
At least a feature film. I think they might have done something for some shorts or whatever.
Television, the parks already had those rides, but I'm talking about the films.
Yeah, at least feature films. The song plays over the opening credits, and that's it.
There is another song in the movie. I don't think the Sherman Brothers wrote it.
No, it's just a little ditty that Fred McMurray sings. It's his chitty chitty bang bang kind of song, but not very memorable.
Yeah.
To be honest, as far as the Sherman Brothers song goes, that Medfield Fight song is not very memorable either. It is not going down in history as one of the Sherman Brothers bangers.
So we've talked about this movie, we talked about the remake with Robin Williams, but there is another remake that no one talks about. In 1988, Disney remade this movie with Harry Anderson in the professor role. Since this is 88, he would probably be still on Night Court, wouldn't he?
Yeah, because Night Court ran until 92, so yeah.
So he would be known. So they remade the movie with Harry Anderson. That also got a sequel the following year, but it is not a remake of Son of Flubber. It's a completely different story.
The Absent-Minded Professor Disney Channel version is not really a remake. It's a sort of a sequel because Harry Anderson is not playing Professor Brainerd. He's playing a Professor Crawford who also works at Medfield, who is the guy who takes over Brainerd's position. He's the new chemistry teacher or whatever. And they know of Professor Brainerd, but the formula for Flubber has been lost or whatever. And he's the guy that tries to figure out what the formula was. So it's basically just another dude trying to recreate Fred McMurray's work. So it's not even a remake. It's kind of sort of a half remake, half sequel.
I mean, if Disney really wanted to, they could take all of these Medfield movies and characters and kind of make a show out of it.
There could be like a Tales from Medfield series or something.
Yeah, you have the college students and you have other characters around there. I mean, there's a Disney Plus series right there.
Yeah, you could have the Shaggy DA wandering around.
Mm-hmm. We talked about the movie, but let's kind of talk about what this movie is kind of based on, because it's based off of two things. The main point of the movie is based off a short story by Samuel W. Taylor called A Situation of Gravity. And in that short story, the narrator of the story is writing a letter to the president trying to solve, President Roosevelt, I believe, saying that he had found the solution to the, at the time, fuel crisis and the rubber crisis, since they were running out of rubber. This is the 1940s, in the middle of World War II. So he had invented this artificial rubber that not only can solve the rubber issue, but also be used as a fuel source, which Professor Brainerd in the movie does use for both. But also the character of Professor Brainerd is based off a chemistry professor from Princeton, Hubert Alea, Alyea. I am hoping I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm not, someone in the comments tell me. Who was known by the nickname Dr. Boom for his explosive experiment. And it's kind of shown in the very beginning of the movie where Professor Brainerd makes an experiment and it goes boom.
Well, he tries to do an experiment and he screws it up, and everything except for the thing he's trying to make go boom goes boom. Because he's trying to use a trumpet to shatter a wine glass.
A trumpet would not have the high enough pitch to make that happen.
I mean, if it did, then anytime you went to a concert, your glasses would be in danger, as proved by the fact that he shatters one of the students' glasses. Things, chemicals leak out of beakers and stuff and go boom. And basically everything but the wine glass is destroyed. So many things wrong with that, but yeah.
It's a Disney movie for kids.
It's a Disney movie for kids. Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the people in this movie, including someone that we've never talked about. The star of this movie, Fred McMurray. And Fred McMurray is a guy that, by this point in his career was already winding down. He was already in his 50s. He had already had, a 40-year career going back to the 1920s at this point. But from the Disney perspective, he had done this. He had done Shaggy Dog. He would do Follow Me Boy for Disney, and he would also do his final Disney movie, The Happiest Millionaire. But his career is just so
And
long.
he was already doing My Three Sons at this point.
Yeah. So I think for the generation that would have watched this movie, that's how they would have known him.
One of the kind of more little known things about Fred McMurray, as in I literally didn't know it until researching this, was that the DC version of Captain Marvel, who is now more popularly known as Shazam, the artist who drew the original version of Captain Marvel used Fred McMurray as his inspiration for the look of it. So his kind of face and not really physique, but the way he looked in his face and stuff in the original appearances was based off of Fred McMurray, which I never knew until doing some research for this. So not a Marvel Comics tie-in, but there you go, a nice little comics tie-in that I was not expecting. How about that?
Nancy Olsen as Professor Brainerd's fiance Betsy. Legend in her own right. She was in the original film version of Sunset Boulevard. Previously for Disney had done Pollyanna, and she actually gets a cameo in the Flubber remake with Robin Williams as a kind of a nod to the movie, to this movie. Not playing the same character, but she's in it.
Yeah, amazingly enough, as of this recording, she is still with us. Go her.
Go her. Keenan Wynn as our villain, Alonzo Hawk, son of Edwin. We just mentioned him.
Yeah, we've talked about Edwin several times before in several movies we've discussed. Edwin has a small little cameo in this as the fire chief.
Playing a very similar character to what he would play in Bates in Toyland.
The interesting thing about this point in Edwin's career was, this is in 61, and he would only live to 66, 1966. So the thing is that his memory was starting to deteriorate at this point, and he could not remember script pages. However, he could improv still. His mind was still sharp in a lot of ways. He just couldn't remember rote script dialogue. So they would bring him on for these small roles, especially with his son, Keenan, and they would tell the actors around him, just let Ed lead the scene and go with whatever he says. And so they would tell Ed, hey, this is what we need from the scene. Got it? And Ed would go, yep. And then they would roll the cameras, and that's what you got. And apparently it was always genius. because that was the part of his brain that was still really sharp. But if you tried to give him script pages, he couldn't retain it. So that's how they worked these last few movies of his career. So if you see anything with Edwin from, the early 60s here, late 50s, that's pretty much what you're seeing, which is really incredible to me.
And of course, Keenan, when his son would have a good career of his own. Annie Get Your Gun. He was in the original 1951 version of Angels in the Outfield. And after doing the two Flubber movies, he would be in Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah,
and that's just a fraction of his filmography.
Yeah, I mean, his filmography has so many movies that I've seen over and over and over again, like Neptune's Daughter, which is one of Esther Williams' major films. Royal Wedding with Fred Astaire. Kiss Me Kate, which I can't tell you how many times I've seen that one. He has a small role in Long Long Trailer with Desi and Lucy. So much. You look at his IMDb page and stuff. So many of the movies on his IMDb page, I'm like, oh my goodness, I have seen that movie 25 times, So, yeah, it's not just Disney movies either. It's all kinds of just really incredible films that I've seen, including he's in at least one Mystery Science Theater movie. Shout out to Laser Blast. Make that at least two Mystery Science Theater movies, because he was also in Parts the Clonus Horror, which is another one of my favorite ones. So yeah, gotta love anybody who was in at least one, but even more than one Mystery Science Theater movie. Keenan Wynn, what a legend.
And I think the last one we can talk about, Tommy Kirk.
Who we have talked about before, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Old Yeller, Shaggy Dog, Swiss Family Robinson, Merlin Jones, the aforementioned Babes in Toyland. So let's get into the plot of the movie. So we have Professor Brainerd, who is trying to make some experiment happen. And throughout the first part of the movie, we're not sure what it is. To the point, he's tried and failed, to the point where the students are kind of make up oddball nicknames for him. The name Absent-Minded Professor, as far as the movie is concerned, comes from he has so far missed his own wedding 3 times. His fiancée Betsy, they have set up this wedding 3 times. They have the dates, they have the guests, they have the gifts, and each time he has completely forgotten the day of his own wedding because he is too wrapped up in his scientific experiments. Betsy, you got a heart of gold for keeping up with that man.
Yeah.
The fact that he has these notes all over him, wedding, 8:30 p.m., don't miss it. And he's about to go out the door, said, no, wait, I've got it. I'll fix the formula this way. And he changes an equation and he alters his way of doing things. And the experiment, we have another boom as his entire garage explodes, knocking him unconscious and missing the wedding. But he has created the big plot point, the big MacGuffin of this movie, flying rubber, or Flubber for short.
It goes boingy, boingy, boingy.
But yeah, he's so into his new invention, his new creation, nothing else matters. It's like, you were given 3 chances. This lady gave you 3 chances to make this wedding, and you botched it all 3 times. And he has the nerve to go back to work, try to talk to her. It's like, dude, you messed up. Leave the woman alone. And like, oh, let me explain. It's like, oh yeah, no, you can explain. And it's like, like Kiki, I want to say this kindly. I'm trying to find a way to say this kindly. Kiki, when you've probably done this as we were recording this podcast, but when someone, when a man is explaining things to you that you just do not care about, you do the yeah, sure, of course, yep, that's exactly what I thought.
You know that I had that exact same thought earlier. The thing is that I mean, he makes a couple of mistakes here, and I get what he's trying to do, but he does go to her place of business. He goes to her job while she is taking dictation from her boss.
It's all Medfield College, though. He's a professor at Medfield. There's the president of Medfield, and she is the secretary to the president of Medfield.
Yeah, but in a way that kind of makes it worse. Like, you don't just barge in on the professor of the college, like.
Don't you have a class to teach?
Yeah, it would kind of be like that, And just think about that with whatever job you personally work. You don't just barge in on the big boss at whatever your job is and interrupt them while they are dictating to their secretary or doing whatever their job is. That's what Brainerd does. As Brainerd is trying to explain to Betsy why he missed the wedding again, and the president's like, okay, do this some other time, and Betsy's like, I don't really want to hear any more of your excuses. Then Alonzo Hawk comes in to be like, hello, president of the college. I have decided to take away my $500,000 gift to the school because this chuckle dork here failed my son and made him unable to play in the giant basketball game versus our biggest rival that's happening like tonight or tomorrow or whenever.
Medfield College is not doing well financially, so they need that money. In fact, they're working on a loan from Hawk's company. We did not intend to do this, even though this is our New Year special. Alonzo Hawk's company, Auld Lang Syne.
Yeah, it was. We kind of laughed when we saw that because it was completely unintentional. Neither of us have seen this since we were kids, and so we had forgotten about the Auld Lang Syne company that Alonzo runs.
So yeah, he runs a loan company called Auld Lang Syne, which is giving a loan to the school. The loan is coming up, and so they have to pay that loan back, or they risk losing the college. Also, as an alumnus of the school, he had a very sizable donation to the school that he wants to take back because his son is flunking because of Professor Brainerd.
I mean, I am on Brainerd's side with the one thing where he was like, not only did your kid get every single question wrong, but he also misspelled the name of the college on the test paper. So...
But he was being generous. He said, I offered him a makeup test, and he didn't take it.
Yeah, I mean, I am 100% on Brainerd's side there. He was bending over backwards for this kid.
Because he knows what was at stake.
Yeah, I mean, Or he may not have, and that might just be how he treated every. He is the absent-minded professor. He may have forgotten this was the rich kid.
Yeah.
It may have just been like, oh, you're a student who is failing and is a bit dim. Maybe you need extra help. And he might have done that for literally any student. In fact, he seems like the kind of professor who probably would have done that for just any student,
Yeah.
But either way, he was bending over backwards to help this student. Good job, Professor Brainerd, That's what a teacher should do. But having been that teacher, you cannot kidnap a student and handcuff them to a desk and force them to take the makeup test.
Mm.
You can offer makeup tests, you can offer extra credit, you can offer whatever, but if the student doesn't show up and do that, you can't ethically just give extra points for nothing,
Yeah.
So you can offer all the makeups and the extra credit and the whatevers that you want, but if, like he said, if the kid doesn't show up and just do the thing, there is literally nothing you can do ethically as a teacher except give them the grade they earned. And so that's what he did. It's literally not his fault.
But Mr. Hawk said, hey, you should pass my boy because where's your school spirit? Don't you want Medfield to win the big game and win the championship? Don't you care about your school? You're past my son.
The thing is, his son, it might not be an idiot, but his son is blowing off his schoolwork. He wants to have it handed to him. Like, do at least the minimum, and you'll probably just pass the class,
And Mr. Hawk is basically saying you should pass my son based off his name alone because I graduated from this college. My family graduated from this college. My family founded this college. And he's expecting his son to get a free pass.
And boy, are there a lot of people like that.
But that's not Professor Brainerd's only problem. Because now that he has problems with his fiancée, she has another suitor, a rival professor from the opposing college, Professor Shelby Ashton, played by the legendary Elliot Reed. Great actor in his own right, has done, in terms of the Disney connection, he's done the two Absent-Minded Professor movies. He's done Follow Me Boy. He done Blackbeard's Ghost. So he has a bit of a good Disney history in his own right. He was also in the classic movie Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. So anyway, Professor Ashton kind of tries to sneak into Betsy's good graces as Professor Brainerd is, let's be honest, pushing himself out of the picture.
Yeah, as much as I'll stand up for him as being a good teacher, he's a really crappy fiance.
Like, he's just expecting Betsy to go with him to the game. He's like, I'll pick you up tonight. We'll go to the game together. After he blew off their wedding for the third time. Like, he wants to go back and act like nothing happened. Professor Ashton is just as much as a smarmy D-bag as Mr. Hawk is, but he's there for Betsy. He is the one that gives her the ride to their wedding. He is the one that is at her side when she needs someone at her side. So as big as a D-bag as Professor Ashton is in this movie and how much he gloats about how his school is better than Medfield, he's there. You're not Professor Brainerd.
Counterpoint to that, though, if you're there because you're expecting to get something, quote unquote, out of it, then you're not really there as a friend,
He's humming "Here Comes the Bride" after it's assumed that they've broken up. Like,
yeah, because he's expecting that, okay, now that she's done with him, I can move in and marry her. You know,
yeah.
he's what we would call now the nice guy. You know,
Mhm.
he's the one that he's not there because he's her friend. He's there because he has quote unquote girlfriend zoned her. You know, like he doesn't legitimately want to be her friend. He's just hanging out looking for his chance. And that's not a legitimate friend. So I'm not really on his side. You can say, like, well, he's there for her all you want, but he's only there for her until he realizes that he's never going to get where he wants with her. And then he drops her like a sack of potatoes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's not really friendship. And that's not really being there for somebody. That's quid pro quo without the other person realizing it, you know? And that's really scummy.
The crappy thing is that it almost works in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, and that is all on Professor Brainerd for not being there.
I will say that my biggest issue with this movie is that they want us to buy into the romance between Brainerd and Betsy, and they don't really give us a reason to be for this couple. Like, you don't really see what caused them to get together, or really like what they see in each other, what they have in common, what they, you know?
He is main character, she is main character, they must fall in love because the script says so.
Well, they're already a thing when the movie starts. You know, we start on the day of their intended wedding. And so we're supposed to just believe that they're already in love for some reason, and that there was a courtship, and that he did something to win her heart. We don't know what that is. We have no context for it. She seems smitten with him for no real reason. He never really shows much affection for her other than just showing up and being like, so I'll take you to the dance, and so we'll do this, and so, you know, just assuming she's kind of his girl, you know, which he may have a reason to believe that, but we never saw that reason.
Like, he fully just expects her to, one, believe everything he says, and two, just be at his side whenever he wants that to happen. And, you know, trying to freaking kill Professor Ashton.
Yeah. If there was even one scene where, like, Betsy was talking to someone else and, like, you know, the housekeeper or something, or anyone else in the movie, and she's like, I don't know, when he first started courting me, he was so different, and he was more attentive, and, you know, on our first date he brought me flowers or whatever, you know, and she just like told a little bit of backstory, and then she's like, and then he got caught up in this new experiment and something happened, you know, and maybe just let us know that, like, yeah, he was always a little bit flighty, but something about this Flubber thing kind of took over his brain.
It should have been a scene between Betsy and Professor Ashton, because he's trying to court her anyway. A small conversation where he looked at her and says, really, what do you see in the guy? That would have been the opening to say, oh, he was so kind, he was so loving, you know, he couldn't spend a moment without me. Then he got into this new experiment, and that's been his whole thing. Just
Yeah,
like you said, but one, it gives a reason why they're together, and two, it kind of drives that knife further into Professor Ashton trying to break them up and get in Betsy's good graces.
So that's really all we need, is a reason to believe in this relationship, which this movie doesn't really give us. And that, I think, is the biggest drawback of this film, is the audience is just kind of expected to believe these two people are meant to be together. And as a viewer, I don't really buy it. They're both very nice people, but I'm not sure I buy them as a couple. I don't know. I don't know how you feel about it.
I don't know. It's like, which is really weird for a Disney movie, because usually we would get a reason. Even in these older movies, there's at least a reason why they're together. I don't know.
Yeah, it just felt like an afterthought. I don't know. But, it's, even though it's really the impetus for the movie, it's not the thing they focus on most, of course. It's, we have this Flubber, and it, of course, does magic stuff because it can constantly gain more energy, which, you know.
Yeah, the more it bounces, the more energy it builds up, goes higher and higher, and and he ends up using it for, it's not just a rubber substitute. It can also work as a fuel source. He's been refurbishing this old Model T, and he hasn't been getting it to run, and he uses the flubber as a fuel source, and it makes it fly. And, like you said earlier, it's a very chitty chitty bang bang moment. And then there's this weird song he sings about Betsy, and how Betsy's gonna hug him and love him and kiss him and be his forever. And the song doesn't really make sense in the movie because it's not a musical.
Yeah, there's really only kind of 3 songs in the movie, and 2 of them are, sports songs.
Yeah.
And one of them is this thing. Speaking of sports stuff, we got a basketball game to go to.
Yep, the basketball game which Medfield is losing terribly.
Because apparently only one of the players on the team is any good, and that was Tommy Kirk, and he can't play because he failed.
And the opposing team are all giants. I don't know if they actually got, 6'5", 7-foot tall actors to play these basketball players, or they got really short guys to play the midfield players. The opposing team is like head and shoulders taller than any of the other players on the midfield team. And they are getting creamed. Like you said, Tommy Kirk seems to be the only competent player at the school.
I mean, so we're told. We never actually see him play. Fred McMurray gets really annoyed with having to listen to the other guy talk about how much better Rutland is at everything than Medfield.
There's a nice little line that Professor Brainerd says, "Yeah, I heard you're paying your basketball players more than the teachers." That's not true. I get twice as much as the star. I'm not saying anything. Like, he's not denying that their college pays for their basketball players, which would actually become a real thing as college players get put into like video games and sponsorship deals. Some of them deserve to get paid.
Yeah, I'm not sure that at this point the colleges were really making all that much money off of the sports like they are now. But yeah, the today at least college players should probably be getting paid for what they're doing.
I think the implication, at least as my interpretation of the scene, is that Rutland is literally bringing in ringers. for their sports teams, and that's why they keep on winning.
Yeah.
But that was my interpretation of the scene, that these are actual college kids playing against semi-professional players.
Could be. Brainerd gets annoyed with all of this and has the bright idea to go home and cover the entire team's chucks with Flubber. And this, of course, leads to one of the most famous scenes in the entire movie.
Yep, a lot of trampoline work in this movie, a lot of wire work as well, especially for like a 1960s Disney movie. And it's not bad. Like, I know this movie was made on the cheap, but the wire work for a 1960s movie isn't so bad. Like, it's very obvious that some of the footage is sped up so the characters look like they're jumping faster and not, but it's not bad.
Yeah, and I am going to say, since we've already kind of mentioned it, the true hero of this film is the Foley department, because without the boingity burbly sound effects, this movie is less believable somehow.
Yeah, every time the Flubber is used, there's a boing or a slap, and the bubbling sound that the Flubber makes when it's used as a fuel source.
Yeah, for some reason that makes the slapstick that Fred McMurray is doing and everything a little more believable somehow.
It's cartoony, but it works in the world of this movie.
Yeah. I don't know why it does, but it does. Your brain believes it more somehow.
Mhm.
So he goes home and he covers the soles of the entire team's shoes with Flubber. And he goes and he gives a big speech about, you got to get out there and hop to it, give it a skip and a jump and a whatever. And they go out there and jump around and do things. And for some reason, nobody really questions this.
Like, the opposing coach goes up to the ref and say, hey, this isn't right. You got to stop this. There's no law saying a dog can't. I mean, there's no law that's saying that the opposing team can't jump higher. But yeah, Medfield wins the game, and then I mentioned it earlier, and this is just the weirdest thing. It almost ruins Professor Brainerd for me, because Betsy leaves with Professor Ashton. She doesn't want to hear it from Professor Brainerd. She doesn't want to hear any excuses. She's done with him. She leaves with Professor Ashton to take her home. As he's leaving her home, Brainerd decides no more Mr. Nice Guy, and then uses his Flubber-powered Model T, basically makes attempted murder on Professor Ashton. Like, he's bouncing his car on top of his, like, trying to run this guy off the road. And his excuse is, this is what a woman will do to a man. Like, if she knew that you were doing this, she'd be done with both of you.
Yeah, he eventually causes Ashton to crash into a cop car that has cops in it.
And they think he's drunk, because it's a head-on collision. And then, amazingly, everyone survives, because this is a Disney movie.
And also, it's right after the basketball game, and they say that they always have people out drunk driving right after the basketball game.
Yeah, they tell him, oh, say this tongue twister. They give him the breathalyzer. But this is where Mr. Hawk kind of puts two and two together, as Biff Hawk, Tommy Kirk's character, kind of says, yeah, the basketball team really started playing better once Professor Brainerd gave him that pep talk. You saw how high they were jumping? It was, I don't know what he said to him, but he said something, and it made him better. And then they look out the window, and they see the flying Model T, saying, okay, something's up.
I like how Biff's just like, oh yeah, that's the crazy professor flying his Model T. And
Say that again.
Doesn't think anything of it, yeah.
Because, like, he's the crazy professor in the school. Of course he's going to have a flying car. Wait, he has a flying car? So the next day, Mr. Hawk tries to buy Flubber, or buy the flying Model T. And Brainerd refuses to sell it. You know, he understands the significance of the Flubber. He understands that it could be a benefit to mankind, but he wants nothing to do with Mr. Hawk and whatever he plans on doing with the Flubber. Like he says, you know, like, you're right, it could be used for good. I'm going all the way to the top. I'm going to call the president. Not the president of the school, the president of the United States, which is the reference to the original story. And this sets up two different paths that we go down in the rest of the movie. He calls the U.S. government, they give him the runaround, but members of the government themselves have been trying to solve what they call the anti-gravity problem, and finding out that this college professor has discovered it, and they're sending people down to Medfield to talk to him. Meanwhile, Mr. Hawk is just carjacking Brainerd. They steal his Model T, replace it with another Model T car that apparently, conveniently, a lot of people in this town just have restored Model T cars just laying around. Isn't that convenient?
Yeah, I was thinking for a town that is supposedly kind of a small town, from what we can tell, how do a bunch of people just have restored Model Ts?
Did the car even have to be a Model T? I get you want to have another famous inventor reference in here. I get that. But it could have been any car. It could have been a modern car that he just reworked to run on Flubber. But did it have to be a Model T? I don't know.
I think they really just wanted, I mean, I don't know, maybe in the original story there was a reference to that. I don't know. I haven't read the original short story. But I think the idea of the Model T was you want something that's not going to be an everyday thing, so that when you see it, you're like, well, there's only one guy in town that has a car like that, you know?
I mean, crackpot inventor with weird car would be a trope. I mean, Back to the Future's whole thing was that.
Yeah.
And now it's the friggin' Cybertruck.
No. Well, that would be like the thing today, because, you know, we think of a DeLorean as just like a cool car that was the time machine and stuff, but that would be like, if you were making that movie today, that is the sort of thing you would use to show, like, what a goofball Doc Brown is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Doc, you made a time machine out of a Cybertruck? Like, no, that's like the crappiest car on earth. Like, that was the DeLorean at the time, you know?
And that was the joke about it going 88 miles per hour, because a DeLorean can't do that. A normal DeLorean can't do that.
Yeah. When you're talking about the absent-minded professor, you know, that is kind of a similar idea. I mean, the Model T was a pretty solid car for the time. But it's like, why would this guy be driving around town in a car that is so far out of date? You know, it's like...
And it's not like he doesn't have a modern late 1950s, early 60s car, because he does at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, you see it in the driveway.
Yeah.
So the Model T is like a hobby for him.
It's his hot rod.
Yeah. You want something with a silhouette that will be very easily understood.
Looks good on a movie poster.
Yeah. And there is really nothing else that looks like a Model T. So it's not a bad idea as far as branding.
So then we get to the school dance. Professor Brainerd has a housekeeper, and she's the one that tries to remind him about the wedding and everything. And she has this odd pep talk of her own because he's already convinced, like, I've lost Betsy, it's over. She doesn't want anything to do with me anymore. I messed up. Which, yes, you did, Brainerd. Yes, you did. But she's saying, you got to fight for your woman. If you love her, you got to fight.
Even a chimpanzee will fight for their woman, which is weird, but okay.
And he repeats it to her at the dance?
Which, not a thing you want to tell a woman that you're trying to win back, just FYI.
Yeah, and then he puts Flubber on his own shoes because he says he can't dance, but he wants to win her back by being a great dancer. So he puts Flubber on the soles of his own shoes in attempts to make himself a better dancer. And he's jumping all over the place, much like the basketball players were, and damn near rips her arms off as he's dancing because he's bouncing.
This does not work because this is not dancing so much as jumping about weirdly and freaking her out.
And then he kind of gets too into it. He's like bouncing around on his own, and he's just moving around, and
he doesn't realize that she has fled the dance floor in terror.
Yeah. Also, they needed a different camera angle because that stuntman jumping looks nothing like Fred McMurray. But yeah, things go wrong. The people from the government come in. Hawk switches to Model Ts, and everything goes wrong because the Model T isn't flying because it's not his. Hawk has repoed Brainerd's Model T, put it in storage.
Hawk has put birds under the hood of the Model T, so it makes Brainerd look like he did that himself and thought, like, this will make my car fly, So everybody laughs when Brainerd tries to figure out why the car's not flying and opens up the hood and all these birds fly out,
And Ashton makes his move finally. He finally goes, he's quotes Shakespeare to her, and he tries, oh yeah, clearly you've made up your mind about him, and he tries to make the moves on her, and like she says, she wants nothing to do with him.
He doesn't quote romantic Shakespeare to her, which there's quite a lot of. He quotes a Shakespearean insult directed at Brainerd's lowest point. She kind of counters with, you're a jerk, That's what you're coming up with at this time, Instead of being like, oh, that was directed at me, he was like, well, if that's what she thinks of Shakespeare, maybe I don't want to be with her,
Well, he is an English teacher, so he would know Shakespeare, but yeah, wrong quote, wrong person, wrong time. You just struck out. Granted, you probably didn't have a chance with her to begin with, but whatever chance you did have with her, gone.
Well, again, as someone who knows Shakespeare and loves Shakespeare, it wasn't Shakespeare's fault, my dude. That one's on you, And she wasn't insulting Shakespeare, she was insulting you. Take the L.
Finally, he just shows, Brainerd finally just shows Betsy the flubber ball that he's been carrying around in his pocket this whole movie. Like, shows him how it works. It bounces higher and higher. And, oh, wait, this isn't my car because my car has a radio in it, and this Model T doesn't have a radio in it. It must have been Hawk. He stole my car. And just for some reason, Betsy just starts believing whatever Brainerd says. Like, I told you, I made this car fly. This thing can work. I know it. I know it. I believe you. And I know you don't, but wait, what? It's one of those weird things. Like you said, like there's no reason for her to believe anything he says, even with the bouncy balls in her being shown to her. There's no reason for her to believe anything that he says. She just does. Now, I understand if it's, hey, stand by your man and all that. I get that. But, like, there's no reason for her to believe him.
The thing is that I kind of got the impression that she believed him all along. She just didn't care. You know what I mean? That wasn't important to her.
The wedding was.
Yeah, I mean, good for him for inventing a thing, but also, can we deal with your invention after the wedding? Like, I kind of felt that was where she was coming from. Not that she disbelieved that he invented a thing or that she disbelieved his story or whatever, but that she wanted to be a priority for him and she wasn't a priority for him. That experiment was not time sensitive. Like, we were told nothing about the Flubber experiment that was like, oh, these isotopes are going to degrade in the next minute and a half if I don't do this right now. He was just caught up in his own thing, and he was like, I got 10 more minutes I can waste on this, instead of being like, hey, you know what's really important? Making sure I don't miss this thing, so let me do it a little early.
Or simply, this can wait until tomorrow. I have a wedding to get to.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of her beef with him. Not that she never believed him or trusted his word on that, but she was like, yeah, good for you, and congrats on that, but you could have waited 24 hours for this. And I would have supported you as Mrs. Brainerd. But you couldn't wait 24 hours for me. And that was what annoyed her.
So now that they've reconciled, they've gone to Mr. Hawk. Brainerd pretends to change his mind, and he will work with Hawk on the Flubber project and sell it to him and give him all the rights and whatnot, and even shows him how it works by putting the Flubber on Hawk's shoes and showing him how it works. Just jump and the Flubber will take over. So he makes the big jump off the second floor of their house, and he's just jumping, and he's jumping out of control. It reminds me of, I don't know if you remember the Pecos Bill cartoon that Disney did.
Not really, no.
So we have, Slowfoot Sue, his girlfriend, and she has the iron chassis, and the chassis works like a spring, and she keeps bouncing. That's what it reminded me of. And that's what he's doing. He's bouncing higher and higher, and he can't stop. And Brainerd is like, yeah, I'm not going to stop you. You are going to keep bouncing until you tell me where my car is. And he says, hey, it's at my lot. And they go to his lot to get it, and he's still bouncing. That is pretty much Mr. Hawk for the rest of the movie. He's just bouncing higher and higher, gaining a bit of an audience. He tries to get his son to get some help, and nothing's working. This is where we get Edwin's cameo as the fire chief. I don't know what direction they gave Keenan Wynn here, because it's like, obviously it's not him in the far shots. Obviously that's a stuntman. But for the close-up shots they have of him, he's like shaking around. Like, it's weird because he's the only actor that does that with, like, Fred MacMurray doesn't do that in the close-up shots. It's just him. It's like hula hooping or something. It's weird, whatever direction they gave him for that scene, but That's him for the rest of the movie. It's just they call they call the police, they call the fire department, and nothing's. They even call local fishermen to kind of reel him in with their fishing poles, and that doesn't work. The fire brigade is out with their net, and he just bounces right through it. Eventually, Biff calls the coach of the football team to bring in the team, and they tackle him in an effort to stop him from bouncing.
I love that, like, a whole carnival basically sets up around the guy.
Yeah, they're selling hot dogs. There's a news crew. Everyone thinks it's some sort of publicity stunt.
Little
Like,
kids are there enjoying it. They got a guy standing there calculating how much height he's gaining every bounce, and the guy's like, "Yep, I'm predicting about 7 p.m. tonight. He's gonna be in real trouble."
Biff is just calling everyone at the school. Yeah, you got to come over. It's amazing. You won't believe this. And Brainerd and Betsy are able to get to the lot and fighting off Hawk's goons, and they get the Model T back. And after everything goes down, they decide that they're just going to go to Washington D.C. They're going to go straight to the man himself.
But of course, they don't think about the fact that the government might look poorly on an unidentified flying Model T coming in over Washington unannounced. And the government decides to turn all of their missiles towards this flying Model T.
Yeah, like they're all happy, they're cuddling. Oh, it's going to be wonderful. We've had this great invention and it's going to change the world, and there's missiles pointing at them. Like if this unidentified aircraft doesn't identify itself, we will shoot it down. Oh, I wonder what they're talking about. I don't know. There's no one up here but us. Wait, us?
I think this movie is only called The Absent-Minded Professor because the dumbass professor couldn't fly on a poster at the time.
They somehow are able to patch into the radio of the Model T, and they're saying, hey, land. And the captain of the Air Force, the captain of the Navy, and the captain of the Army are all calling him saying, you got to land at our base and this, that, and the other. And they land on the lawn of the White House. And nice backdrop of the White House there. I don't think they actually filmed this in Washington.
Yeah.
There's that funny part where they're about to get shot down, and you mentioned this off mic, but it does need to be mentioned because it's funny as hell. Is that he's trying to identify himself? He's like, wait, don't shoot! I'm an American. Look at my credit cards.
Yeah, that is one of the realest things in this movie. Let me prove my American status. Look how much debt I have.
And he finally sells the Flubber to the U.S. government for, I'm sure, only wonderful and practical and not at all horrifying purposes. I'm sure they will not be using Flubbers as weapons of war. No. Oh, can you imagine how Nam would have changed if Americans military had Flubber?
I'm gonna say probably not a lot. I mean, we already had some pretty horrific weapons going in there, so.
And finally, Professor Maynard and Betsy get married finally at the end of the movie, saying the I do's.
That's a pretty good transition.
Yeah. Are you sure this is what you want to do, Professor Brainerd, and selling your Flubber to the U.S. government? I do. And just the transition into the wedding.
Yeah.
And, they have their marriage, and, I mean, it's a nice joke they have at the end there with the sign on the Model T with the just married, with the just crossed out and saying finally on it.
Yeah.
Fourth time the charm, right? That's the absent-minded professor. So, Kiki, Does the absent-minded professor have the magic?
I mean, yeah, it's cute. There's not really a whole lot of plot. You know, it's very thin for a film.
It feels, and you can get this feeling from a lot of the not tentpole Disney movies of the era, where they were really making this for television. Like, this will be in theaters for a little bit, but there's points in the movie where it's clear there's supposed to be a commercial break.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this with a lot of the older movies like this. Like they already planned ahead for this to air on television. They probably would have going to air this on Disney's program. So it's like, okay, we need an ad break here, an ad break there, and we can split this up into two 1 hour episodes here and there, and that's where the plot suddenly shifts halfway through. The movie is still good. I'm going to say yes, it does have the magic. I understand why they felt the need to remake it years later, because a more coherent plot, a more consistent plot of the Robin Williams version versus the very episodic nature of this version and a lot of movies of this era. But I think it's still worth watching. Like, if you've only seen the Robin Williams version, I would watch this at least once to see to see the original at least once, and if you want to go back to the Robin Williams version, that's fine. But I think the original does need to be watched for the historical value of the movie.
Yeah, and the actors in this one are great.
Yeah.
A lot of Disney legends in this.
So let's move on to next week. Kiki, it is time for us to enter the unknown. It is finally time for us to talk about Frozen 2.
I'm not even going to try to do that riff.
You don't have the vocal cords for it right now?
I do not have the vocal range for that even at the best of times.
So come back next week as we talk Frozen 2, and we will talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Don't let the magic stop here.
Keep the conversation going. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Rewatching the Magic.
We are also on Blue Sky, rewatchingthemagic.bsky.social. And new episodes are available every Monday at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com and youtube.com/@rewatchingthemagic. Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it.
We know that right now, things are tough.
But in the words of Jim Henson, the only way the magic works is by hard work. But hard work can be fun.
Check out our show notes for ways that you can help.